The contract that stripped her of everything, except her dignity. The moment the private jet's door closed behind her, the silence became unbearable. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, judgmental kind that pressed against the chest and made breathing feel like a chore. Amara Vale sat stiffly in the cream-colored leather seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, fingers trembling despite her efforts to stay composed. Outside the small oval window, the city lights faded into darkness as the jet taxied toward the runway. This was it. There was no turning back now. 3 weeks earlier, she had been nothing more than an invisible girl in a crowded world. 21 years old. A hospital cleaner by night. A part-time college student by day. The kind of person people looked through instead of at. The kind who learned early that dignity didn't pay bills, and silence was often safer than speaking up. And now, she was leaving everything she knew behind, because desperation had finally cornered her. The headlines would never tell her story. No one would ever know the truth behind the signature she placed at the bottom of that contract. They would only see the outcome, a billionaire and a young girl who sold herself. But they wouldn't see the hospital corridors that smelled like antiseptic and hopelessness. They wouldn't hear the doctor's voice when he said, "We've done all we can." They wouldn't feel what it was like to hold her father's hand while machines kept him alive, knowing that time, not love, was the only currency left. The jet lifted off and Amara closed her eyes. She remembered the lawyer's office too clearly. Cold, white, efficient. The kind of place where empathy had no seat at the table. The man across from her didn't judge her. That somehow made it worse. He slid the contract forward, his voice steady as he explained the terms as if he were discussing a lease agreement. 1 year. Full discretion. Complete obedience within clearly defined boundaries. In exchange, every medical bill, past, present, and future, would be paid in full. Experimental treatments included. Private care. No waiting lists. Read it carefully, the lawyer had said. She did. Every word burned into her memory. Ownership. Control. Confidentiality. She signed anyway. Because when love is backed into a corner, it will bleed to survive. The jet landed just after sunset. A black car waited on the tarmac, polished to a mirror's shine. The driver didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence followed her all the way through the gates, up the winding hill, and into a private estate so massive it looked unreal, like a place designed to remind visitors exactly how small they were. Inside, everything was pristine. Too pristine. Marble floors that echoed with every hesitant step. Walls adorned with abstract art she didn't understand but knew must be worth more than her entire lifetime's earnings. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive restraint. A woman in her late 40s greeted her at the entrance. Sharp suit. Hair pulled back. Eyes observant but not unkind. "Miss Vale," she said calmly. "I'm Eleanor. Mr. Cross will see you shortly." Amara nodded, clutching the strap of her worn bag. It held everything she owned now. The rest, her old life, her independence, her illusions, had been traded away in ink. She was led into a vast living room where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city below, glowing like a galaxy of artificial stars. She sat when instructed, perching on the edge of the couch like someone afraid of leaving a mark. Then she heard his voice. "Stand up." It was calm. Controlled. Not loud. Not angry. Amara rose instantly, heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. He stepped into view and for a split second she forgot to breathe. Lucien Cross. The man whose name moved markets. The man tabloids described as ruthless, untouchable, and emotionally hollow. He looked nothing like the caricatures. Tall, yes, but lean, not imposing. Dressed simply in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up. His face was unreadable, his eyes sharp with a kind of intelligence that made people nervous. He studied her like an equation. "You're smaller than your file suggested," he said. "I'm sorry," she replied automatically, then hated herself for apologizing for existing. He tilted his head slightly. "Don't apologize unless you've done something wrong." Silence stretched between them. He circled her once, slowly. Not like a predator, but like someone inspecting a fragile artifact. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "Because I signed a contract." "And what does that contract say?" he pressed. "That I belong to you," she whispered. That was when his expression changed, not to satisfaction but to something darker. Something colder. "Then listen carefully," he said. "Tonight you're going to do exactly what I tell you." Her chest tightened. "Take it all off." The words hit like a slap. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. She nodded once, slowly, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. This was the price. This was what she had agreed to. This was what saving her father cost. She reached for the zipper of her jacket. "Not your clothes," he said sharply. She froze. He stepped closer, his voice lowering, deliberate. "I meant the mask. The fear. The shame. Everything they've taught you to carry because the world told you you were small." She looked up, confused. "You think I bought you for your body?" he continued. "If that's what I wanted, I wouldn't have needed a contract." Her breath hitched. "You were chosen," he said, "because you've been underestimated your entire life. And tonight that ends." He turned toward the window. "Eleanor, give her the files." The woman placed a thick folder into Amara's shaking hands. Inside were medical records, transfer approvals, treatment schedules, paid invoices. Her father's name was stamped across every page. "All covered," Lucien said calmly. "Every cent. For as long as he needs." Amara's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the couch, tears finally falling. "I didn't buy you," Lucien said quietly. "I bought your freedom from desperation. And in return, I need your courage." She looked up, stunned. "For 1 year," he continued, "you'll stand beside me. Not as property but as proof. Proof that people like you deserve dignity. Proof that this world is wrong when it decides who matters." Her voice shook. "Why me?" "Because," he said, finally meeting her eyes, "you still believe kindness has value, even after the world tried to strip it from you." Outside, the city glowed unaware. Inside, something irreversible had begun. And Amara realized, with a mix of fear and awe, that this was not the night she lost herself. It was the night everything started to change. They laughed at the girl beside the billionaire, until the room fell silent. Morning arrived without mercy. Amara woke to sunlight pouring through curtains so sheer they felt unreal, like the rest of the house. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory returned all at once. The contract, the jet, Lucien Cross's voice, and the words that had shattered her expectations. Take it all off. Not her clothes. Her fear. She sat up slowly, her heart still adjusting to the truth she hadn't fully accepted yet. The room was enormous, elegant, and painfully quiet. A tray waited by the window, breakfast arranged with careful restraint, as if luxury here was never meant to shout. A soft knock came at the door. "Good morning, Miss Vale," Eleanor said as she entered. "Mr. Cross has requested your presence in the dining room in 1 hour. There's an event today." Amara's stomach tightened. "An event? A charity summit?" Eleanor replied. "Investors. Board members. Media. Media." The word landed heavily. Eleanor gestured toward a row of dresses laid out with surgical precision. "You'll wear one of these. Choose whichever feels like you." Amara stared. She had never been asked that before. Downstairs, Lucien Cross stood by the long dining table, scrolling through a tablet. He looked up as she entered, not with ownership, not with expectation, but with assessment. "You slept," he observed. "Yes," she said. "Good. You'll need your strength." They ate in near silence. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak. "What happens today?" Lucien leaned back. "Today you'll be judged." Her grip tightened on her glass. "They won't say it out loud," he continued. "But they'll think it. Who you are. Why you're here. What you must have done to earn a place beside me." Amara swallowed. "And you're okay with that?" "No," he said calmly. "I'm counting on it." The venue was a glass cathedral of wealth, towering ceilings, polished floors, and people dressed in confidence more than fabric. Conversations hummed with arrogance disguised as networking. The moment Lucien entered, the room shifted. Eyes turned. Whispers followed. Then they noticed her. Amara felt it immediately, the subtle narrowing of eyes, the calculated smiles, the assumptions forming faster than facts. She stood straight anyway, her chin lifted, reminding herself that she was not invisible here. "Not today." "She's young," a woman murmured nearby. "Bought tastefully," another replied. A man laughed. "Midlife crisis comes in many forms." Lucien heard everything. He said nothing. They moved through the crowd, introductions flying past Amara like unfamiliar languages. Titles. Last names. Net worths disguised as handshakes. Then came the panel. Lucien took his seat on stage. An empty chair sat beside him. "For our next segment," the moderator announced, "Mr. Cross has requested an additional voice." The room buzzed. Lucien stood. "This is Amara Vale." Polite applause followed, thin, restrained. She'll be speaking today. Silence. Amara's heart slammed against her ribs. She turned to him, eyes wide. You didn't tell me? I told you you'd be judged, he said quietly. Now show them why they're wrong. She walked to the podium on legs that felt borrowed. A man in the front row leaned back, arms crossed. Is this a joke? Laughter rippled. Amara took a breath. She thought of her father. The hospital. The nights she scrubbed floors while pretending she didn't hear the nurses whisper. She thought of every time she had been dismissed. And then she spoke. I'm not here because of who I know, she began. I'm here because of who I lost. The room stilled slightly. My father is alive today because someone decided that life was worth more than profit. Before that, I was invisible to every system meant to protect people like me. Murmurs quieted. I've cleaned your offices. Served your food. Been the girl you didn't look at twice. And yet, when desperation came, I didn't ask for pity. I asked for a chance. A woman scoffed softly. How rehearsed. Amara didn't flinch. You see charity as generosity, she continued. But for people like me, it's survival. And survival doesn't look dignified. It looks desperate, ugly, ashamed. Lucien watched, unmoving. I'm not here to be admired, Amara finished. I'm here to remind you that dignity doesn't belong to wealth. It belongs to humanity. Silence. Then a slow clap began. One person. Then another. The man who had scoffed looked away. After the panel, the energy had changed. People approached her, not with mockery now but curiosity. Unease. How long have you been working with Mr. Cross? One asked. I haven't, she replied calmly. I've been living. Lucien joined her later, handing her a glass of water. They underestimated you, he said. They always do, she replied softly. Across the room, a board member whispered sharply to another. We need to review the optics of this. Lucien's eyes darkened. That night, as the city lights reflected in the windows once more, Amara realized something important. They hadn't finished judging her. They had just begun to fear her. They tried to humiliate her in public, not knowing she held the truth that could destroy them. The backlash came faster than Amara expected. By morning, her name was everywhere, but not in the way she had hoped. Headlines danced across screens, dripping with implication. Billionaire's companion steals spotlight at charity event. Who is Amara Vale, and what is she really to Lucien Cross? Manufactured sympathy or genuine story? Amara stared at the tablet in her room, her hands cold. The words blurred together, twisting her story into something cheap and suspicious. Comment sections were worse. Another gold digger pretending to be deep. She knew exactly what she was doing. You don't stand beside men like Cross without paying a price. She closed the screen, her chest tight. Downstairs, Lucien was already on a call. His voice was calm, but his jaw was rigid. The sign Eleanor had quietly explained meant he was angry. They're demanding a formal statement, Eleanor said later. Several board members feel you've become a liability. A liability. The word stung more than any insult online. Amara nodded slowly. I understand if you want me to leave. Lucien looked at her sharply. No. But. They're uncomfortable, he interrupted. Good. Discomfort is the beginning of truth. Still, the pressure mounted. Donors withdrew. Invitations were rescinded. A private meeting was called. One Amara was not invited to attend. She waited in the library while powerful men decided her worth behind closed doors. When the doors finally opened, the air felt colder. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward, his smile tight and patronizing. Miss Vale, he said, we believe it's best if you take a step back. For optics. I'm not optics, she replied quietly. He chuckled. Everyone is. Lucien said nothing. He watched. Another board member leaned in. You're young, untrained, unqualified. You embarrassed several donors. Amara's heart pounded. By telling the truth? Truth is a luxury, the man snapped. We deal in strategy. Lucien finally spoke. Then you've forgotten why this foundation exists. The room fell silent. You think she's the problem, Lucien continued evenly. But the problem is that she reminded you where your money comes from, and who it's meant to serve. One man scoffed. You're risking everything for a girl you barely know. Lucien turned to Amara then. Are you afraid? She hesitated. Then shook her head. No. I'm tired. That night, someone leaked the contract. Stripped of context. Stripped of truth. Social media exploded. He bought her. She sold herself. Disgusting. Amara felt the humiliation like a physical weight. She stayed in her room, lights off, listening to the distant hum of the house. A knock came at her door. Lucien stood there holding the original contract. "They think this defines you," he said quietly. She laughed bitterly. "Doesn't it?" "No," he replied. "It defines me." He handed it to her. "Read the final clause." Her hands trembled as she scanned the page she'd been too desperate to examine before. Clause 17. In the event of public disclosure, all rights transfer to the contracted individual. Her breath caught. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means," Lucien said, "they tried to ruin you using a document that now belongs to you." The next morning, Amara stood before cameras again, but this time she wasn't alone. Lucien stood beside her, silent. She held up the contract. "You've seen this," she said steadily. "But you haven't seen what it gave me." She looked directly into the lens. "It gave me access, records, meetings, numbers." Gasps rippled through the press. "And it showed me something terrifying," she continued. "That some people donate to feel powerful, not to help." She named names. One by one. Accounts froze. Investigations launched. Board members resigned before noon. Lucien never spoke. He didn't need to. That evening, as the sun set over the city once more, Amara stood in the same room where she'd once felt small. She wasn't shaking now. They had tried to strip her dignity. Instead, they had handed her justice. The millionaire watched in silence as the world finally took her seriously. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Within hours of Amara's statement, the foundation's offices buzzed with investigators, auditors, and legal teams. Phones rang unanswered. Assistants whispered nervously in hallways where confidence once lived. The men who had dismissed her as optics suddenly couldn't be found. News anchors stopped smirking. They started listening. Amara watched it all unfold from the same library where she had once waited quietly while others decided her fate. This time no one told her to sit. No one told her to wait. They came to her. Emails poured in. Messages from families, nurses, patients, people whose lives had been quietly bought and sold by donors who cared more about praise than purpose. One message stood out. "My son would be dead if you hadn't spoken. Thank you for seeing us." Amara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears slipping free. Lucien entered the room silently. He looked tired, but lighter, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally shifted. "You didn't have to go that far," he said. "Yes, I did," she replied. "They would have done it again. To someone else." He nodded. "You understand now." She turned to him. "You planned this." "I hoped for it," he admitted. "But I didn't expect you to be the one who burned it down." The board reconvened, this time under scrutiny. Cameras lined the entrance. Questions flew. Accusations followed. And then something unexpected happened. A vote was called. Lucien declined to preside. Instead, he stood and gestured toward Amara. "She should lead this discussion," he said calmly. The room erupted. "She's not qualified. She's not a donor. She's the reason you're still here," Lucien interrupted. "And the reason the public still trusts this foundation." Amara stood slowly. Every eye locked onto her. "I don't want power," she said evenly. "I want accountability." Silence followed. "I don't want charity used as camouflage for ego. I want transparency. And I want the people we claim to serve to have a voice in how this money is spent." Pause. Then a single board member cleared his throat. "And who do you propose leads this new direction?" Amara met Lucier's eyes. He smiled faintly. "I propose," she said, "a council. Survivors. Caregivers. People who know what desperation actually feels like." The vote passed by one. Outside, headlines shifted again. "Girl once mocked now reshapes billion-dollar foundation." From contract to catalyst. The voice they tried to silence. That night, Amara stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The same skyline that had once felt like a wall now looked like a promise. Lucien joined her. "They'll say you used me," he said quietly. "They already are. And that I used you." She exhaled slowly. "Did you?" He didn't answer immediately. Then softly, "I gave you a door. You chose to walk through it." She turned to him. "Why didn't you stop them sooner? Before they hurt people?" His jaw tightened. "Because I thought money was enough. You showed me it wasn't." They stood in silence, the city breathing below them. "You're free," he said suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "The contract," he continued. "I voided it. Publicly. You owe me nothing." Amara felt something crack open inside her. Not fear, not relief, but something steadier. I was never owned, she said. Lucien nodded. No. You were never small either. For the first time since signing that paper, Amara felt whole. Tomorrow the world would see her differently. But tonight she finally saw herself. She was bought in desperation, but walked away owning her future. The morning after the announcement, Amara woke without fear for the first time in months. There was no contract hanging over her head. No countdown ticking in her chest. No unspoken debt waiting to be collected. Sunlight filled the room gently, not harshly, as if even the day itself understood what had changed. Her phone buzzed, not with gossip this time but with invitations. Universities. Advocacy groups. Medical ethics panels. People who had never wanted to hear her voice before were suddenly asking for it. But one message mattered more than all the rest. Your father is responding better than expected. The treatment is working. Amara sat on the edge of the bed and cried, not from pain this time but from release. The kind that comes when survival finally gives way to hope. Later that day she returned to the foundation offices, but not as a symbol, not as a headline. She came as herself. She sat with families waiting for approvals. She listened. She asked questions no one had bothered to ask before. How long have you been waiting? What did they make you give up? What do you need besides money? People answered because they felt seen. Lucien watched from a distance. For years he had believed control was the same as responsibility. That power meant shielding himself from emotion. Amara had undone that belief without ever raising her voice. One afternoon, as the chaos finally settled, he found her alone in the conference room, reading through a proposal written by a former nurse. You could leave, he said. Do anything you want now. She looked up thoughtful. I know. And yet, she replied, I remember what it felt like to be invisible. I don't want to escape that memory. I want to use it. He nodded slowly. You're stronger than I ever was. She smiled faintly. I had to be. The press tried one last time to reduce her story, to twist it, to frame it as scandal-turned-fairy tale. She didn't fight them. She simply told the truth. I wasn't rescued, she said in her final public interview. I was empowered. There's a difference. When asked about Lucien, she answered calmly, he opened a door. I chose who I became after walking through it. Months later, the foundation released its first annual report under the new council. Funding had increased. Trust had returned. Lives were being saved, not quietly, not selectively, but transparently. Lucien stepped down from daily control. He didn't disappear. He learned. On the day Amara officially resigned from her position, she packed her bag, the same worn one she had arrived with, and stood at the front gate once more. Lucien walked her out. No more contracts, he said softly. No more fear, she replied. They shook hands, not as buyer and bought, not as benefactor and symbol, but as equals. As Amara walked away, the world didn't see a girl who had once been underestimated. They saw a woman who had turned desperation into dignity. And somewhere quietly, karma smiled.